Well, Alan Jones has certainly copped a lot of flack over his comments about the Prime Minister's late father. This is his first interview since the controversy began.
Well, Alan Jones, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Have you been shocked by the reaction to what you said?
Well, I don't think it's a question of being shocked. I think that you just have to face the reality. The reality is, Melissa, I said the wrong thing. And on reflection, I think you often have a different perspective on things from what's happening in the spur of the moment. It was a fairly raucous university night, and I opened my remarks, as I've said before, I spoke without notes for about 58 minutes. I opened my remarks with a comment which was gratuitous, unnecessary, over the top, potentially offensive and likely to bring very significant hurt to the Prime Minister. It shouldn't have been said in any set of circumstances, and immediately I realised that it had been made public. I took action to make sure that I could apologise publicly rather than issue a press release, and I sought to talk to her and offer that to her in person. She, of course, chose not to take the call, which is her entitlement. So it's not a question of being surprised. That is a reality. You must face the reality. I can understand that reality.
Alan, a lot of people would applaud you for that, virtually the vast majority of people. But I suppose during that initial apology, when you finished and then there was the but, and then you went on, rather than leave it there, it was the going on and continuing sort of the attacks on the Prime Minister's policy. In retrospect, do you wish you hadn't done that?
Well, David, it's very difficult, and you understand this better than most. Had I walked in, firstly, I determined that, and I did all of this myself, I didn't talk to anybody else, I determined that I would speak very, very briefly with no qualification, no amplification, and no attempt to excuse anything I'd said, so I just apologised and I handed it over to the media. Well, of course, then all sorts of questions came up about whether I liked her and why I didn't like her policies and what I didn't do, and I sought to answer those honestly. Had I called it off then I suppose they would have said, well, Alan Jones called a press conference, but there wasn't much engagement with the press. He made a statement and he walked away. So I allowed everybody to ask, and the questions kept on coming. And I guess the whole thing did go on too long, and that gave the impression that I was qualifying what I had initially said. That wasn't my intention, which was why I made further points about all of that yesterday.
Alan, can I put some comments to you from our viewers? As you can imagine, like everywhere, we've had a lot of feedback. One is an email from Ron in South Australia, and he says, if your comments had been made on Facebook or even in the schoolyard, you'd be labelled as a bully. Do you see yourself as a bully?
Well, look, that's a judgment people who know me would have to make. And the answer to your question is I'm not. But, of course, if people gain that perception, so be it. I have to say I find all that social media stuff in relation to Julia Gillard as well in the AWU is completely unacceptable. I said that on air. The kind of things that were said about her is disgraceful. I mean, I've had stuff said about me in recent days, and before that, I might add, before this episode broke, which sort of sent a chill down your spine. I'm not a bully, but I do think some of the tactics used in relation to the social media can border on the bullying, and I think that the Prime Minister has suffered from that as well.
Yeah, Donna from New South Wales says, are you a woman hater?
Well, look, let me just say, I just had a text this morning. I mean, I just don't understand where all this is coming from. I've answered those questions, I think, in the past, though I don't publicly say too much about the kind of support I've given. There are a lot of women out there who do it tough to get to the top, and part of the problem, unfortunately, in political life and other areas, is that to get to the top you need some money, and campaigns are very hard to fund. And I've been approached on many occasions in the past to stump up money for women conducting political campaigns, and I've supported those women. I had a note this morning to say that I was the only person in the Sydney City Council election that gave regular opportunities to 3 female candidates on my program to articulate what their views for the future of Sydney were. When a vacancy just came up on the Sydney Cricket Ground Trust, I was asked whom I would recommend, and I said simply, it's time we got a few more women in here, and I recommended a high-profile woman, and that recommendation was accepted. You two both know that my attitude towards women, both in my own office and everywhere else. But, of course, these conclusions are drawn. They're very hurtful, but you just got to live with them.
Yeah. Can I put to you a comment made by a fellow broadcaster, John Laws, last night? Just have a listen.
It was his decision. I think it was very, very unfortunate. And I really don't think that Alan or John or any of us would like somebody to say that our deceased parents died because they were ashamed of us. I think it's a pretty bad thing to say.
What did you think of his comments last night? He was fairly measured, I felt, when I listened to him.
Look, John Laws is a man of wide experience, and that is a perfectly legitimate comment. I'd agree with it now. I mean, my comment gave the impression of the smart aleck. I'm not a smart aleck. I think you're both aware it was a stupid remark that I heard at my godson's birthday party earlier in the day, and in the undergraduate spirit of the evening, they were all talking about, because it was a Liberal Party function, all talking about the Labor Party and all talking about broken promises and lies and all that sort of stuff. And I should have resisted any kind of temptation to make that comment, and John Laws is perfectly correct.
Yep.
None of us would want that said. But I had a very close affiliation with my father, and you do grieve when your parents die. It was, look, I've said it 1,000 times. If you had your time all over again, but we never have our time all over again. That's the point. That's the sad truth of it.
And every one of us has said stupid things, that's for sure. Alan Jones, thanks very much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you.